morning, everyone. The July 15, 2020 Committee on the Budget and Government Operations Committee is called to order. Pursuant to applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means it is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is conducted by video conference. As a matter of order, the Budget Committee will take public testimony at the beginning of the meeting. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes for each speaker.
Yeah.
Pursuant, please mute yourself. I can hear someone. As pursuant to Rule 58E, public comment will be limited to 30 minutes. We will now have a roll call to establish a quorum. Will the aldermen please make sure their microphones are unmuted? Thank you. Vice Chair Silverstein.
Here.
Alderman King.
Present.
Alderman Hairston.
Here.
Alderman Sawyer. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Harris.
Here.
Alderman Sedlowski Garza.
Present.
Alderman Thompson.
Here.
Alderman Cardenas.
Here.
Alderman Quinn.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Present.
Alderman Curtis.
I'm going to work.
Alderman Curtis. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins.
Here.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Present.
Alderman Tabares.
Here.
Alderman Scott. Alderman Burnett. Alderman Irvin.
Here.
Alderman Taliaferro.
Here.
Alderman Raboris.
Here.
Alderman Wagisback.
Here.
Alderman Austin. Alderman Ramirez Rosa. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Spizzato.
Here.
Alderman Napolitano. Alderman Riley. Alderman Smith.
Here.
Alderman Riley. Alderman Smith.
Here.
Alderman Tunney.
Here.
Alderman Kappelman.
Here.
Alderman Osterman. Alderman Dowell is here.
Alderman Curtis is here.
Alderman Curtis.
Ever delightful Alderman Lopez is here too.
Ever delightful Alderman Lopez is here. I saw Alderman Nugent.
I'm here. Sam Nugent's here. Good morning.
Okay. Any other non-committee members here?
Committee member Alderman Mitchell just joined.
Committee, Alderman Mitchell is here. Okay, we have a quorum of 24. The committee has been informed today that there are no public speakers that have signed up to speak, so that concludes the public comment period. We will begin with the monthly report. Approval of the June 20th monthly Rule 45 report for the Committee on Budget and Government Operations. I know this report is like very long this month. We're going to try to shorten it up, but I want to know, are there any questions from my colleagues? Please raise your hand if there are. Seeing no hands raised. Can I get a motion to recommend approval of the report by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine quorum?
So moved by Alderman Tunney.
Riley, so
Motion
moved.
made by Alderman Tunney, hearing no objections, so ordered. We will go out of the regular order of the agenda today and take item number 2 first, followed by item number 3, and then we'll end with item number 1 last. So item number 2 on the agenda is from the Department of Assets, Information and Services. It's an amendment. It's an ordinance amending section 2-51-050 of the municipal code regarding digital availability of city programs and services. We have with us today Jason Kunish, the IT director from DoIT, from former DoIT, now the Department of Assets, Information and Services. He's here to explain the ordinance. Mr. Kunish? I think you're on mute.
There we go. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Dowell and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jason Kunish, Design Director of the Bureau of Information Technology of the Department of Assets, Information and Services, or AIS. The matter before you is an amendment to the municipal code to allow the commissioner of AIS to enter into agreements to make mass communications technology available to the city of Chicago. It is intended to address a common scenario. A mass communications technology is required as part of a coordinated government response to current events outside of the active or planned technology capacity of the city, like COVID-19 or the Crawford Station response. A community member, whether a technology company, business, philanthropic, or other organization, has the capability and is willing to allow the city to use it, but there are legal and contractual hurdles to lending the technology to the city. In this situation, the aiding organization does not want to enter into protracted service agreement negotiation with the city, but that happens today. When it does, it slows or stops the city's ability to communicate with residents. This amendment would grant the Commissioner of AIS the authority to enter into an agreement with the capability provider, allowing the city to be properly protected and to have access to the technology in a timely manner. This would ensure that the city is able to communicate necessary information to residents through as many communication channels as possible. Recently, we launched the Chicago Design System, a pro bono collaboration of the Mayor's Office, AIS employees, and Ogilvy Chicago. We experienced similar issues indemnifying Ogilvy for their work, in that we had no one who could accept the work for the city. That process remains open at the end of much legal work, which could have been avoided with the ordinance before you today. Thank you.
Mr. Kunish, that was a mouthful. Can you sum it up in 2-year-old language?
Sure. I'm a designer by trade, so I'm happy to do that for you. In this case, the University of Chicago has a communication technology, Upland Communications. They can text message within their community, and it helps them get critical information to University of Chicago's community, in a timely manner. Mayor Lightfoot was talking with leadership of University of Chicago. They said, we would be willing to give this capability to the city. Now, sending text messages costs money. In this case, potentially $80,000 to $100,000. University of Chicago is willing to pay that. What they don't want to do is have to have their lawyers and Upland Communications lawyers and the city lawyers work out a deal. What they would like to have happen is for the Commissioner of AIS to be able to sign an agreement with Upland and have that go through our process almost as though it were a procurement or something of that nature, but that we'd have somebody who could sign on and accept this because it's a gift. And the reason for the gift is it's an unplanned capacity that we could use, in this case in response to COVID. Again, it's a gift that they would like to give. We just don't have the ability to accept it or anyone with the authority to accept it today.
All right, thank you very much. In terms of the hands up, I see we have several members of the committee with their hands up. I will start with Alderman Thompson.
Unmute myself. Haven't seen that one before. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So I appreciate your presentation. Let me just say, whether it be the public sector or private sector, whether it be this gift or anything, nobody wants to enter into protracted negotiations at any point in time. However, we have lawyers because what are the ramifications? What are the liabilities? Not knowing just because somebody's giving us a gift doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't come with details that I think our lawyers need to review the document and fully understand. So, for example, you mentioned, I think you said Ogilvy or something about where we were the only one that could indemnify. Okay, so now we're indemnifying. The city now has taken on some exposure. To what dollar amount are we exposed on that indemnification? So I don't know the cost. I don't know what this is. Is this, is there future business? It's not uncommon to give free at the front end, only then to charge on the back end. And so if we enter into these agreements, are we entering into free today only to cost us tomorrow? And so, you know, we have a procurement. This isn't your money. It's not my money. It's not the mayor's money. It's all of our money. It's all the residents. And that's why compared to the private sector, it does take a little bit longer because we have to be very cautious. We've got lawyers that read the documents and sure, we'd like to move the process, but you know, I have some questions as I've just asked. And also, we don't have any really information on what this does. For example, this texting, presumably that would be subject to FOIA. And this isn't an end around to try to avoid these messages that we're doing it on the public work from being exposed to the public. So I guess I don't know, what you said was a lot of stuff, but I didn't hear any details of what it is other than a blanket. Let's let the commissioner enter into this agreement, not the procurement commissioner, but the commissioner dealing with the technology deal with it. So I guess, Jason, if you can answer some of those questions.
Yes, sir. So a few issues that you've raised there. So number one, yeah, the city would still be protected under this ordinance in that the city would still negotiate with the technology provider and still would make sure that FOIA, HIPAA, language access, et cetera, would be something that we would need to negotiate and work out with the technology provider, the same as though it were a procurement in terms of how we would evaluate bringing the technology on board. Where it's different is that, yeah, I don't think it's looking for an end around in the procurement process. I think it's more in response to a short-term, gift is the intent here.
What is the term? Excuse me, Jason. Then what is the term of that gift?
Well, typically, I think it would depend upon the nature of the gift itself. So in this case, I believe, Upland or the University of Chicago is willing to give between $80,000 and $100,000 of SMS usage, and then.
But if it's short term, is it for 6 months? Is it for 12 months?
It would depend upon. So that in this case, it would depend upon how quickly we were to use the technology. It's almost like filling up a gas tank. If we texted very quickly many messages, then it would run out fairly quickly. But yes, the intent here is that it would be within a year is probably a reasonable time frame. With the idea being that if these were programs that we would want to extend, then the city would need to begin to budget and actually move this into a procurement process, because then it would be part of the ordinary operation of the city.
So then we would eventually have to pay for this.
Yes, we would have to make a decision and say, well, is this gift worth it? But potentially we could use this technology and say, you know, we tried this out. University of Chicago said it was good. They were willing to pay for it. We tried it out. We don't see the value, or we have some other issue with it. We don't want to continue this program. We could also have a great experience with it and say, boy, actually, you know, this has some value for us. Potentially, this is something we want to procure.
And so you've talked with ethics, and this is not a violation of the ethics ordinance?
That is my understanding. I have not spoken with ethics directly myself, but my understanding is that this has the chief of staff's approval.
The ethics chief of staff?
No, the chief of staff, Maurice Klassen. So I can follow up and make sure that we've gone through the ethics process and get you back information through the chair.
And I hear you. I mean, I'm all for it. It raises, you know, other issues. I mean, whether they give this texting capability or somebody gives, you know, brooms to the streets and sand, or free light bulbs to test out at Bureau of Electricity. I don't think we can accept those gifts. And I think we run into this, you know, there's other laws that we just need to make sure that we're not taking something inadvertently creating a problem. So I would like to have Chair to have some opinion.
Right.
The other departments. So I'm done. I've taken a lot of time. I'll listen to my colleagues. I'm sure they'll ask questions.
Alderman Thompson, I've asked the law department to get on this call to opine on the legality of this agreement. And I'm also asking about Steve Berlin's, if he has reviewed it. So hopefully we will have that answer shortly.
Thank you, Chair.
As soon as we get someone from law, we'll have them interject here. We'll move on to Alderman Irvin.
Good morning, Chairman. Just questions. What is different about this and the texting that we may receive from through our cell phones that kind of gives like the flash message? What's the difference between that and this?
It's simply the providing the capability. All those things have a cost to them, sort of like filling up a gas tank. That is a technology that's controlled currently by OEMC. And so we can use that technology as well. This would just be an additional capability. So again, it's, I think the intent here is when trying to, you know, strictly communicate with the public. So less, you know, buying brooms or other things, but more around public communications technology, specifically, you know, in these kind of emergency situations, that we can get the word out quickly. And so we try to do that through as many channels as we can, email, text, social media, next door, you know, just trying to make sure we get the word out to as many people in as many ways as we can.
So is it me, or are we given permanent authority for a temporary situation?
Well, I do think that this comes up, like, so back to the Ogilvy situation, and this extending originally, you know, I believe this ordinance originally was considered to give the prior commissioner the ability to enter into agreements to launch our 311 app. There's just a lot of cases where there isn't a person in the city who actually has the authority contractually to enter into agreements. So for example, like with the Ogilvy situation, they did the work, they gave us the public mark, we own that, there's no exposure to us. But they also created a free campaign to launch and to give to us. And we couldn't accept that work because they said, well, you know, part of the work is if there's an image in there of Michael Jordan and somebody doesn't own that, you know, Ogilvy could be sued if the city uses it, and they wanted us to indemnify them. And we said, well, we can't, simply because we don't have anybody who can sign off on this kind of a deal, even if it were approved by legal. And our legal team went through that deal and said, basically, we're fine with it, except there's no one with this authority to say yes.
So in a case such as that, or such as this, when you have a specific contract or a specific item that needs to be presented, why can't that item be presented to council for approval and the individual given the authority be given the authority for that specific item or for that specific approval or for that, specific instance versus granting the blanket authority over something that which council may not be necessarily in agreement with or have any control over, because we at that time would have given blanket authority where only the commissioner and law would be the only approving factors.
I mean, I suppose that one could look at it that way. There are many similar projects and decisions that are within the purview of the commissioner today that have similar impacts in terms of dollars and cents that are not routinely brought to city council. I'm really unaware of the decision-making process on that. I'm more of someone who works within the system to execute and direct program. So I think that's for the council to decide. But I guess my understanding, or at least my experience of it, would be to say, typically speed to market. I haven't seen a lot of I haven't seen any nefarious sort of pro bono projects come in, but I have seen things like the Ogilvy thing die on the vine because we can't accept the gift. So I think that's sort of the intent. But again, we can follow up with more detail through the chair as well.
Okay. You go back to the texting. So this is broader, in your opinion, than just the text application that OEMC currently utilizes.
Yes. So another example would be Google Translate offered to translate all COVID-19 materials for free. We couldn't accept that either. So there's different cases where instances like this do come up. And I understand that, we can't, there's definitely a gift horse aspect to this. I'm not trying to say like, oh, every person who's trying to give a gift to the city has pure intention, or that Google wouldn't expect us to integrate Google Translate and then eventually be forced to pay to use the service if we found it of value. I think this is an attempt to create a more responsive city infrastructure and to find a way to be nimble and flexible in the face of a lot of changing and challenging conditions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It just, and I guess this is more probably be directed to law. If we have the ability to accept gifts on behalf of the city, or if the commissioner would have the ability to accept gifts on behalf of the city. And then I guess the procurement process is a separate issue that has its own process. So if it's just specifically to accept a gift, I just want to make sure that's our intent, and that's clarified in the ordinance versus just giving this broad authority to enter into an agreement, which I could understand.
All right, thank you, Alderman Irvin. Alderman Roboris, followed by Alderman Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question, along with my other colleagues, would be if they're allowing us to use the availability of their digital service, is the city's information encrypted so no one pulls any information from the city? That's my concern. That's the only question I got, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, sir, it is. So that would be what we would negotiate, would be that in this instance, we would go to the technology provider, in this case, Upland Communications, and say to them, look, we want to review and make sure that this matches our city criteria, before we just accept the gift, blankly from University of Chicago. What the kind of donating organization would like to avoid is they don't want to have to be part of that process. They want to kind of stand aside and say, look, city, you have concerns. If you work out those concerns with the technology provider and you're okay with using that technology, then we would like to give you, that ability. We'd like to give you the gift. So that would be our work.
Be similar to proprietary information?
Pardon me, sir?
Would the phrase encrypted also relate to proprietary information, the city information?
Yes, sir. So any requirements that we would have for the messaging technology, we had a similar case come up with the way in which we accept intakes. When we had COVID-19 hit, we could no longer do in-person intake in a lot of different facilities, for homeless shelters and otherwise. We actually borrowed some technology from Illinois Department of Public Health, and we had to do that in a way that we made sure that it was HIPAA compliant and went through all of our other compliance processes. So any similar thing that we would do here would go through all the same information security and information privacy controls that we have for anything that the city does that way.
Alderman Raborez, are you through? Or,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
oh, I didn't know. Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to non-committee members. Alderman Lopez. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I just wanted to say for the record that I appreciate the University of Chicago's interest in providing a gift to the city. But I do think, as aldermen, we have to ask proper questions. And I think some of those have been raised already. What I'm trying to get my mind around is the $100,000 value that's been assigned to the gift. Is that $100,000 worth of text messages that then has to be reloaded into the system with more money down the road? That's typically how these work? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so some of us use this technology in our campaigns, or versions of this technology in our campaigns. And is there something unique or different about this particular application that would set it apart from the 5 or 6 other competing technologies that already exist that many of us use in the political sphere?
No, the technology itself is fairly a commodity, is my understanding.
And so literally, this is really the University of Chicago wanting to give us $100,000 worth of free text messages.
Yes, I mean, there may be additional capabilities of the platform of which I'm unaware, but in essence, yes.
And just so I'm really, where I'm a little confused. So we give you this authority to go and negotiate this agreement to accept that $100,000 worth of texts. Can you state for the record that we will not then be encumbered with future financial obligations, like we have to promise to load in another $500,000 or $1 million worth of text messages? Or is this simply to allow for the $100,000 to happen? And if there's to be a longer term relationship, that might be something that would come before the council. I just want to make sure I have this clear.
Yes, sir. My understanding is that there are not to be strings attached, that the negotiation between the technology provider and the city is where these kinds of issues would be raised. And potentially, were there strings to be attached, hey, after this gift, you must do this, that would be when the commissioner could say, this is not appropriate. And this needs to be something that would be brought before city council, or the gift needs to be refused. But if it were something that, we're able to receive the $100,000 in free text messaging, then we'd be able to use up to that amount. Then after that, we would have to put any, additional amount of money that we would want to spend would have to then go into our budget and would have to be part of the procurement process. That's at least my understanding of the intent here.
And I don't know if there's someone here from the law department yet, but I think the concern here that everyone has is certainly not about the gift. It's the potential for there being a longer term financial entanglement as a result of these negotiations that occur within the department. And so if someone from law could state for the record that, no, if we decide to enter into an agreement that has financial implications for the city of Chicago's budget, i.e. we promise to spend X amount of dollars in exchange for this gift, I would want to know that that would come back through this committee, given our very precarious budget situation that we're heading into this fall.
Thank you very much, Alderman Riley. What I think I'm going to do here is put a pin in this item and hold it until we have someone from the law department to come in and answer the questions we've heard before you spoke, Alderman Riley, and for those that I think will come up from Alderman Villegas, Alderman Moore, Alderman Lopez, and Alderman Vasquez, who also have their hands up for questions. I would rather have the law department here because these questions aren't going to get answered. So
Sounds good.
with that said, we're going to move on to item number 3 on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Kanish.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great day.
Item number 3 on the agenda, which is an ordinance introduced by myself, amending municipal code section 2-92-490 to further regulate duties of the chief procurement officer regarding the electronic directory maintenance requirements for certified eligible and minority-owned businesses. Do I have a motion to accept the substitute ordinance by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine the quorum?
So moved by Alderman David Moore.
Thank you. Hearing no objections, so ordered. The substitute ordinance, so you guys know, that's before the committee now, only added the effective date clause, which was missing in the original ordinance. Before we move on, I see that Alderman O'Shea, Alderman Burnett, Alderman Napolitano, and Alderman Villegas have joined the meeting. Would you, Alderman, like to be counted as present for the purpose of the quorum?
Alderman O'Shea, yes, please.
Alderman Villegas, yes, Madam Chair.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Cardona.
Okay.
Alderman Napolitano present. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Alderman Cardona, we heard you as well. All right, so we have with us the Chief Procurement Officer, Shannon Andrews from the Department of Procurement Services to explain the ordinance. And then I'll have some comments followed by, we also have a guest with us, Ralph Moore, founder and president of Ralph G. Moore and Associates.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Alderman. Really briefly, what this ordinance will require is that in addition to information that's currently made available on our directory, which is online, for our certified minority and women-owned business enterprises, the directory currently includes information such as contact information, NAAQS code certification, meaning what the firms are certified in terms of their specialty area. It also denotes ward location, also community area location. And so the directory, in addition to affirming the certification of a firm, provides additional information for the purposes of serving as a tool or a resource of connecting vendors in the community and for networking purposes. What this ordinance is requesting is that in addition to the information that is currently provided, that we also, the 2 things that we would be adding, one would be the ethnicity of the certified firm. And the second thing would be to identify if the firm is located, if it's a firm that's certified in the city of Chicago, if it's located in an economic development impact location. We have reached out to our stakeholders and partners to work through and develop a plan around the logistics of being able to make both of these things available on our directory. And we have shared this information as well with some of the folks in our vendor community to express the interest in being able to provide this information. And as such, the department is fully on board with working with the chairman and our other additional stakeholders to ensure that the information is made available on the directory moving forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Director Andrews. One of the reasons why I wanted to put this forward was because many times, many of us meet with general contractors, people that are doing development in our community who tell us, well, we didn't know how to find MBE certified businesses to work with. We didn't know if there were any minority or, in case what I asked for are African-American businesses. They don't know where to find them. So this takes away that excuse by allowing them to use the directory as another source of information on companies that may be located within our own communities across the city that can be involved in various projects within our communities, especially in areas of low and moderate income communities. So I have asked Ralph Moore, who is founder and president of Ralph G. Moore and Associates, RGMA, to provide a statement and support and to answer any questions that you have. Mr. Moore is recognized as one of the world's foremost thought leaders in the area of supplier diversity and minority business development. He was the lead trainer for the National Minority Supplier Development Council. And for 24 years, he has positioned his firm to be involved worldwide. He's the author of the RGMA 5 Levels of Supplier Diversity Maturity Model, which has been embraced as the gold standard for benchmarking supplier diversity initiatives. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Madam Chairperson, thank you for the honor to testify in support of this ordinance. I have a long and rich history with Chicago's affirmative action program, including being selected as a member of the first Affirmative Action Advisory Board in 1990 and under the leadership of Diane Miner. I've also been a member of a number of task forces convened to advance the city's affirmative action program, including the group that was assembled in 2003 to craft a response. Yes.
Can you please put on your video? I would like people to see what you look like.
Oh, I had it on. I'm sorry. I think your host might have control of that.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, I put on my good shirt today too. So good thing I'm on. Thank you very much. Let me go back to my text here. Okay. Again, let me just pick up where I left off. It's been a blessing that my work has taken me around the world. And wherever I go, I boast about Chicago's commitment to minority business development and the magnificent job that we do in this area. You would be shocked at the number of cities that have surrendered their formal programs and replaced them with toothless initiatives with no goals that results in anemic spend totals for Black and Brown businesses rather than invest in a disparity study as Chicago has. Yes, we have lots of work ahead, but I remain optimistic because I know that the mayor, along with the African American Aldermanic Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and many other aldermen are committed to expanding opportunities and building minority and women-owned businesses throughout Chicago. As we look at the ordinance, the two sections of the ordinance that has already been discussed, it's important. Let me just take a look at break them down into two sections. The section that provides the location as it relates to a qualified investment area. This information provides prospective developers, investors, and corporations seeking tax credits and other related benefits, information related to contracting with businesses located in these defined areas. The upside to this information being available is that it increases opportunities for certification eligible businesses and certified minority businesses to secure contracts with businesses seeking the benefits of those associated with those locations. The upgraded directory will also give aldermen an enhanced tool for sharing with companies seeking work with stores, with companies located in their wards. The second part of the ordinance that speaks to the ethnicity of the minority groups who control the businesses listed in the directory is also very important. George Floyd's tragic murder produced an aha moment for many corporate leaders in terms of the lack of economic opportunities for Black and brown businesses in America. This information in the directory will regarding the minority groups of the persons or person who control the businesses will enhance the directory's value as a tool for private sector decision makers. The latter group includes firms seeking minority contractors, service providers, and business partners for projects related to the city's Department of Procurement, as well as projects that are not associated with the Department of Procurement. What you might not recognize is that the city of Chicago's, this directory is used as a tool throughout the country by companies looking to connect with minority businesses. And in many cases, those projects have nothing to do with the city of Chicago, other than it's one of the most useful resources as it relates to finding minority and women-owned businesses. The latter category of contracts will not help the city's minority spend reports. However, the minority businesses on the receiving end of those contracts will be forever grateful and hopefully in a stronger position to grow their businesses and hire more Chicagoans on their payroll. Let me end my testimony with a word of caution. My travels over the last 41 years as CEO of RGMA has also taught me that there are many haters out there hiding in the weeds, waiting for Chicago to make a misstep and provide an opening for a legal challenge to our program. Although items like the net worth cap were established to slow the growth of minority businesses, the city must not stray too far from the federal guidance. Otherwise, the city could find itself in a weak legal position to defend the affirmative action program. Remember, there are 200 new federal judges that have been confirmed by the U.S. Senate during the past 3.5 years that would love to have the future of Chicago's program in their hands. With Colette Holt on the team, the city has access to the planet's brightest mind on affirmative action, and I advise you to consider her counsel as you make tweaks and start making changes to the ordinance. Thanks again for the special opportunity, and I look forward to your questions. Stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Alderman Villegas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me take this virtual background off. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ralph, how you doing? I remember
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Working with Ralph at the Illinois Department of Transportation, and he was a consultant of ours and did a great job in challenging the industry to use more diverse firms.
Thank you. We're still there.
So, yeah, I know. I appreciate that. And so, Ralph, this is more of a question not related to. Well, first of all, I support the ordinance because I like the fact that begins to identify the ethnicity of the firms as well as where they're located at and what type of incentives might be associated with where that company's located at. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Ralph, and just in your opinion, I know that you're an expert and you've done a ton of work throughout the country. As it relates to like personal net worth and gross receipts, as you stated earlier, that some cities, the amount of funding that's being spent or money that's being spent with minority-owned firms is really abysmal. And I take a look at cities in states like LA, Miami, where they've lifted the limits on minority firms in order to build capacity. And when we take a look at those cities, for example, in states in California, 20 billion spent with minority firms. In Miami, 4.1 billion. And then when you come to Chicago with the personal net worth, gross
I am
receipt
working with a group
caps,
of other people right now on
we
this
have,
very day.
Alderman Moore, would you mute yourself? Thank you.
That's not me. I'm not sure who
No,
that is.
Alderman Moore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
So when we take a look at those caps associated, and we're using SBA size standards, and then obviously the Chicago being one of the third most expensive market to do work in. I look at that as a missed opportunity to grow capacity, especially when we're talking like $700 million in MBE, WBE spend. Given that we have a ton of work that's going to be coming to the region through the Capitol Bill, O'Hare 21, and just all types of other work, private development. What's your opinion on either lifting the personal net worth and gross receipts altogether, or taking a look at really putting them at a higher level that will begin to grow capacity for minority and women-owned firms?
That's a great question. I'm somewhat conservative. Again, I'm an old Arthur Anderson guy. I'm a CPA. If you lift those caps, and again, I go back to when the caps were first put in place, the initial net worth cap was $250,000. I mean, you can't open a business with $250,000. So it's been elevated. I think it's, what is it, 1.3 or 1. I know it's higher now. And again, I should have that number at my disposal. But the reality is, if you go too fast, those are the kind of mistakes people are waiting for. Now, if you're prepared for a lawsuit and you have all your ducks in a row, you might be prepared. You might be able to do that. Again, I speak with Colette Holt quite a bit. I know she's not in favor of it. I certainly think the 200 new judges that are out there that we all know are conservative, they're coming after everything Obama, everything that people of color have ever wanted to happen in America. So we run the risk of coming before one of those judges, and it could be an unfortunate outcome for the city. So my advice would be to go slow, but at the same time, we can encourage businesses that have graduated to still do business with the city. One of the amazing programs that most people are not familiar with, when Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida, now we're talking about 1990s, the late 1990s, they had a program called One Florida. Now, Jeb Bush is no way for affirmative action. But what he would do, and at a program where I was conducting a training session, he would take the microphone, take the stage, and talk about the importance of anyone doing business in Chicago or in Florida working with minority businesses. He said it's not a requirement, but we will be measuring those who do and those who don't. And you can decide which side you want to be on. So if in fact we take the bully pulpit and be advocates for those minority businesses that have graduated, they can still do business and be successful in Chicago. I don't think the net worth cap is the only thing holding them back. I think we have to be advocates for those businesses being prime contractors, as opposed to assuming minority businesses have to be subs. There's other things in capacity building we can do. Again, I don't want to take up too much time with my answer, but as it relates to the ordinance, I would take the advice of Colette Holt and go slow with the net worth cap, but at the same time, be aggressive in other areas of the business.
Thank you. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the response, Mr. Moore. So then with that comment there, then that really we have to take a look at then the definition of what we define lowest responsible bidder then, because if we're ultimately looking for the lowest responsible bidder, I think not just the price should be one of the qualifying factors. Maybe we need to take a look at some other qualifying factors in order to determine what does responsible bidder mean to us.
Exactly right. And frankly, again, we do a lot of work in the private sector. There are more, and again, the 5 levels that were mentioned earlier, there are a number of, Cincinnati, Ohio has more world-class supplier diversity programs, or corporations with world-class supplier diversity programs, than Chicago. We have our corporate community has not stepped up as other corporate communities around the country. And I know this is a priority on Mayor Lightfoot's agenda, and I think the city council can get behind that. Let's encourage, nudge, whatever you want to call it, our private sector corporations to do more. And I'm surprised. Well, I shouldn't say surprised, but I'm excited by the number of mid-size corporations that are not your large Fortune 500 companies that are coming out in light of the George Floyd tragedy, saying, "What can we do?" So I think there's an opportunity to bring companies to the table to embrace partnerships with minority businesses. And we just have to provide a program or strategy to get them to the table.
Yeah, I agree.
All right,
Well,
Alderman Villegas, the conversation is now kind of like spiraled into
Yeah,
more
and
contracting and
yeah.
oversight issues, which could be in another committee.
Yeah, so
This
let
is
me just
more
wrap
of a,
up, Madam Chair.
yeah.
It's not very often we get a gentleman like Ralph Moore to come to the committee and speak to. Again, he's highly recognized throughout the country. And as I stated before, I worked closely with him when I was at the Department of Transportation. So that'll be the end of my question, Madam Chair. And I look forward to further discussions with Ralph Moore and Colette Hall. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Alderman Moore.
To that point that you just made, Chairman, those questions are going to come up, and that's why I believe that I'm trying to find the budget mechanism in this, and that's why I'm feeling that this should be, not feeling that this should be in contract and oversight and equity. I've been working with some other, especially after this situation with the looting and then getting Walgreens and other people contracting. Part of its situation came up is that we've heard this too, that people do not know where to get contractors for. So I right now got a group of contractors and associations working together to put that together and working on something similar. And I was hoping that we can gel all this together in the contract Committee on Contract and Oversight and Equity. If it was just a dollar issue, I understand that, but it seems like this is more like a policy structural issue around contract and oversight. And that's why I would like to have this in the Contract and Oversight Committee.
Okay, Alderman Moore, thank you for your perspective on this. This is something that actually generated from some discussions with other aldermen. It was also discussed in the Black Caucus meeting. This committee is called Budget and Government Operations. This to me seemed to be a government operations issue. I'm the chairman of this committee, and I thought it would be more appropriate to bring it forward. So I'd like to move forward with this. If there's additional things that your group wants to add to this that would strengthen the city's position and help us more in the community, I would say go ahead, make the amendments that you want to make to this ordinance and take it through contract and oversight. I was also, knowing that Alderman Austin was also not available, and I wanted to move this really quickly, I moved forward with it.
I respect that, but the mayor's item was, she didn't take it through another committee, and Alderman Austin wasn't available when we brought it to the Contract and Oversight and Equity Committee, and was able to move it. The committee meetings don't stop because the chairman is not there. We can move things, but.
All right, well, I didn't choose to take it through contract and oversight. It is a government operations issue as well. If you want to make any kind of motion related to that, then, you can, but I would like to move forward with this.
Well, given the fact that I didn't really have a chance to sit down to talk with, I don't know, am I lost? It seemed like my video was gone, but maybe everybody can still hear me, I hope. Pardon me?
We can hear you, Alderman.
Okay, I
Walker.
keep talking. I just lost video. I would make a motion to move it to Contract and Oversight and Equity Committee.
Hearing no second on that motion, we'll lay that motion on the table. Moving forward, do you have any other questions, Alderman Moore?
No, Chairman, thank you, though.
Thank you. Alderman Irvin.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chairman. First off, I want to thank you and your wisdom and leadership on this issue. You're correct. This is something that we have discussed in caucus. However, discussion and getting into action are two separate steps. So appreciate the leadership on this. Furthermore, Ralph Moore is a great expert in this. Ralph's been a mentor of mine for the last 25 years. We're both accountants, we're both CPAs, we both work for Arthur Anderson, and we both were at SIU. So I've known Ralph for many years and really believe in what his life's goal has been and what he has been working on. The one question that I have around this issue is, as we go to determining or publicizing ethnicity, should we be looking at creating a goal by ethnicity? Because currently we have a broad goal for 26% minority participation. Should we be looking at goals in specific categories for minority communities based on capacity to more or less guarantee the ability of our community to participate both for the Black and Brown communities and other minorities as determined by the federal government?
Well, certainly, again, in the private sector, a matter of fact, we're advising our clients to consider separate programs by ethnicity and category. But again, the restraint you have in the public sector becomes the legal matters and the challenges you might have. I would yield to lawyers, but your disparity study will tell, and again, I think there's going to be a whole new generation of disparity studies that will drill down as to not just the availability of minority businesses, but they'll look at each category, not just as a total, but individually. But obviously, and I'm also a trustee at the Chicago History Museum, so I'm a history guy. So when you look at the history of what Blacks had to go through, how corporate America didn't hire us until the mid 60s, and people talk about reparations, I think it's back wages. I think they use the wrong term, with 12 generations of not being paid for our work. I mean, we have a different experience, but we have to be careful once again as we bring that experience to the public sector. The legal system has not allowed us to separate the category minority business as of yet. And there might be something we can do outside of the ordinance, but again, I would yield to your legal advisors on that. But certainly there are differences in each classification, and we should acknowledge that as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and hopefully we can pass this today and subsequently at our council meeting next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Irvin. Alderman Hairston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend you on this ordinance, getting this done. I've been at this for a couple of decades. Ralph, you have been invaluable.
Thank you.
It is crazy to me that we're still having to prove that we're Black, that we have a ceiling as to how much money that we can make as Black people, that the systems that we have in place, be it our legal system, that we are still dealing with these issues. And I think that the city has been successful in managing to keep, our program alive and well. And Colette has done, an excellent job where that has come from. And I guess my comment is, number one, to say thank you.
Thank you.
But number two, to really challenge my colleagues that when these companies come before us with less than, that we push back and not accept it. And, You know, that is our responsibility. We have allowed this to go on. And every time we find a new way to tweak it and they find a way to get around it, we still let them get a pass. And so what I'm challenging my colleagues to do is to say no more passes. So I want to thank everybody for their work, and I will be supporting this.
Great. I agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Pat, you're muted.
You're muted.
You're muted.
All right, I want to say that Alderman Osterman and Alderman Ramirez Rosa have joined the meeting. Alderman, would you like to be counted as present for the purpose of a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, got you both.
Thank you.
Alderman Ramirez Rosa, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to be recognized to be counted present. Thank you.
Alderman Riley moves to pass.
Alderman Riley moves to pass on this ordinance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, this item will be reported out at our next city council meeting. Alderman Moore, Ralph Moore, got my Moores mixed up. Thank you for appearing before our committee today. Thank you for your expertise and your wisdom.
Thank you.
And to Director Shannon Andrews, thank you very much for your support around this issue as well. I also want to acknowledge Shauna Sims, who I see is also with us today. Thank you. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda. Oh, before we go to item number 1, we're going to go back to item number 2 because I understand the law department is with us. I don't know who is speaking from the law department, so if you could just begin when I mute myself. Thank you. Law department. Okay, Jeff Levine is not here yet. So we'll go to item number 1, which is an ordinance amending concerning an amendment to the annual appropriation ordinance year 2020 within fund number 925 for the office of the mayor. Can I get a motion to accept the amended substitute ordinance by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine quorum?
Riley so moved.
So moved by Alderman Riley. Be clear that the amendment was to add one additional grant from the Mather, I think, Foundation. Walder Foundation, Fellowship Foundation of $95,000. The amended substitute ordinance adds grants for the Office of the Mayor, the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, the Department of Public Health, the Department of Family and Support Services, and the Department of Transportation. The total appropriation is $71,030,000, which includes new COVID-19 funds of $18,299,000, new grant funds of $51,356,000, and carryover grant funds of $1,375,000. We have our Deputy Budget Director, Latoya Bond, with us today to explain the ordinance and to answer questions. We also have representation from the various departments. Ms. Vaughn.
Good morning, Chairman Dow and the members of the committee. My name is Latoya Vaughn, and I'm here to represent the 925 grant amendments. We also have the department representatives who are also here that can speak to any programmatic inquiries. Our amendment, as Chairman Dow stated, is for $71,030,000. The programs are broken out by diversity and research, which is $145,000, cultural programming, which is $250,000, health, programs, which are $8,094,000, child care programs, which are $11,194,000, homeless and transitional programs are $41,000, and infrastructure programs are $51,306,000. The Office of the Mayor is requesting new private grant funds in the amount of $95,000 from the Walder Foundation for the Walder Fellowship Program. In light of COVID-19, immigrants and refugees are in dire need of an expanded targeted engagement and support that informs them of safety protocols and health initiatives, access to economic relief programs, and tools for self-advocacy to successfully engage with city departments and agencies. These funds will be used to support one position tasked with community outreach, facilitating discussions with local activists, and providing overall support to Chicago's local and metro immigrant and refugee communities while strengthening our partnerships with national organizations. The Office of the Mayor is also requesting new private grant funds in the amount of $50,000 from the Policy Link to support cities and counties' fines and fees program. These funds will be used to evaluate existing fines and fee structures in Chicago and to support reform efforts. Work will be conducted through a combination of resources from the mayor's office, the clerk's office, the city clerk, and external academic partners, such as the University of Illinois, Chicago. The grant monies will be used to further the work Chicago has already made towards re-imaging the historic structure, which to date has included eliminating city sticker ticket debt and those who can least afford it, reduction of excessive late fees on the city sticker program, elimination of license suspensions for non-driving violations, launch of a series of new payment plans that expand the options for paying off debt, and new pathways to compliance to help residents who are eligible avoid any number of devastating consequences of the city's owner's debt, including water shutoffs, tow and impounds, as well as other fees. The Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events is requesting new federal CARES Act funding in the amount of $250,000 from the National Endowment for the Arts to support the City Arts Program. These funds will be used to provide increased general operating support to organizations that have applied to the DCASE's existing City Arts Grant Program for nonprofits and cultural organizations. The CARES Act funds will be used to give roughly 10 to 20 grants to organizations based on the potential of these additional funds to save jobs and to keep the doors open. Organizations with significant salary, artist, and facility costs alongside high non-recoverable expenses and lost revenue and limited unrestricted net assets will be identified as having the greatest need. The Department of Public Health is requesting additional federal CARES grant funding in the amount of $1,834,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the Epidemiology and Laboratory Capacity Grant. Funds will be used to assist in reaching targeted frontline healthcare personnel while also creating an infectious prevention and control program, which includes an innovative infection prevention and control training curriculum aimed at providing training and expertise in the public health workforce, delivering through a variety of interactive modalities. Health departments will help build a foundation, knowledge, and culture of the infection prevention control expertise in the healthcare and public communities in order to keep healthcare workers, patients, and healthcare environments safe from COVID-19 and other infectious disease threats. The Department of Public Health is requesting additional federal CARES grant funds in the amount of $4,926,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the National Hospital Preparedness Program. These funds will be used to assess the healthcare systems, improve the pre-hospital EMC care and transport of the COVID patients, improvement in healthcare worker readiness for COVID through assessment and training, collaboration to ensure capabilities to ensure for target populations, especially those in long-term care facilities are met, support clinical care providers by organizing a medical operations coordinating cell and supporting patient care by purchasing ventilators, support supplies, and replenishment of PPE. The Department of Public Health is requesting additional federal grant funds in the amount of $1,334,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the Vaccine Preventable Diseases Program, also known as the Immunization and Vaccines for Children Program. This supplemental funding will be used to increase the city's capacity to enhance flu vaccinations through the upcoming flu season by increasing staff, launch a citywide communications campaign, increase healthcare provider flu vaccinations by making adult flu vaccines available, and COVID-19 pandemic preparedness. The focus of these additional funds is to increase adult influenza vaccine. The target goal is to increase the walk-in flu vaccine number from 8,000 to 12,000. The caravan will be used to provide mobile influenza clinics, and the caravan mobile unit will also focus on back-to-school vaccinations and childhood vaccines. The Department of Family and Support Services is requesting new Federal CARES Act funding in the amount of $1,900,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the Early Headstart program. Funding supports one-time activities in response to COVID-19 to meet the needs of 35 Early Headstart delegate agencies to ensure that early learning services are provided to over 2,000 children ages 0 to 3 and their families in a safe and healthy manner. DFSS anticipates that the following costs will be covered with these funds: educational kits for children and families to use at home for at-home learning, e-learning costs, including laptops and tablets for centers and loaners for families and related costs, deep cleaning and janitorial services at center-based sites, sanitation and personal protective equipment, increases for mental health support service contracts to provide virtual mental health related trainings and preparedness sessions during the recovery period for COVID. Also modifications to technology and infrastructure to support citywide early learning online application hotline support and reporting on modified program operations as required by the funder. The Department of Family Support Services is requesting new federal CARES Act funding in the amount of $967,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This is to support the Early Head Start Child Care Program. Funding supports one-time activities in response to COVID to meet the needs of 23 Early Head Start and Child Care partnerships and delegate agencies to ensure that community-based early learning services are provided to over 1,000 children of the ages 0 to 3 and their families in a safe and healthy manner. The Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program was created when DFSS was awarded a new grant program in 2014 to expand Early Head Start services to children being served in local neighborhood child care centers, developing partnerships between delegate agencies whose programs were already compliant with Head Start and Head Start program performance standards. These funds will be used to also provide educational kits to children and families to use for at-home learning, e-learning costs, including laptops and tablets for centers and loaners for families and related costs, deep cleaning and janitorial services for center-based sites to reopen, sanitation and personal protective equipment and other related supplies. It also supports increases for mental health support services, contracts to provide virtual mental health related training and preparedness sessions during the recovery period for COVID-19, and also for modifications to technology infrastructure. All the delegate agencies that are associated with the Department of Family and Support Services are included in the attachment. The Department of Family and Support Services is also requesting new federal CARES funding in the amount of $176,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the Early Head Start expansion program. Funding supports one-time activities in response to COVID to meet the needs of 5 Early Head Start expansion delegate agencies to ensure that community-based early learning services are provided to 200 children within the ages of 0 to 3 and their families in a safe and healthy manner. Funds will be used to support educational kits for children and families to use for at-home learning, e-learning costs, including laptops for centers and loaners for families and related costs, deep cleaning and janitorial services, sanitation and personal protective equipment, increases for mental health support service contracts to provide virtual mental health related trainings and preparedness sessions during the recovery period of the COVID-19, as well as modifications to technology. The Department of Family and Support Services is requesting new federal pass-through grant funds in the amount of, new federal CARES Act funding in the amount of $8,151,000 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the Head Start CARES Act program. Funding supports one-time activities in response to COVID-19 to meet the needs of 43 Head Start delegate agencies to ensure community-based pre-kindergarten services are provided to over 7,400 children ages 3 to 5 and their families in a safe and healthy manner. DFSS anticipates the following costs to be covered with these funds, and they include educational kits for children and families to use for at-home learning, e-learning kits, costs including laptops and tablets for centers and loaners for families and related costs, deep cleaning and janitorial services for at the centers for pre-opening, sanitation and personal protective equipment, increases for mental health support services, contracts to provide virtual mental health related trainings and preparedness sessions, and modifications to technology infrastructure. The Department of Family Support Services is requesting additional carryover state funds in the amount of $41,000 from the Illinois Department of Human Services for the Emergency and Transitional Housing Program. These funds will be used to support shelter-related purchases and renovation projects. There are 10 delegate agencies associated with this contract, and they're also attached. All of the services provided from the Department of Family Support Services and the Department of Health are citywide, and Mayor's Office are citywide. The Department of Transportation is requesting additional federal pass-through grant funds in the amount of $20 million from the U.S. Department of Transportation through Cook County government for the Cook County Highway Program. Funds will be used for various transportation improvement projects throughout the city as coordinated through Cook County. Each project requires the written approval of the Superintendent of Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways. For neighborhood level improvements, the county dictates how much funding is available for each ward. Funds will be used on various projects, including major capital projects, resurfacing, neighborhood level improvements. The funding will also be used for phase 1 engineering, phase 2 engineering, resurfacing, grinding of existing asphalt, removal and replacement of distressed pavements, sidewalks, strippings, curbs and gutters, ADA improvements, signage, bridge, viaduct improvements, pedestrian safety improvements, pedestrian refuge islands, curb extensions, bicycle safety improvements, on and off street bikeways, traffic signals, pedestrian countdown timers, streetscape improvements, lighting, landscaping, roadway improvements for improved bus operations, painting and power washing, traffic control protection, and other attendant highway apparatuses. The Department of Transportation is also requesting new state funds in the amount of $29,609,000 from the Illinois Department of Transportation for the Rebuild Illinois program. These funds will be used for the design and construction of various transportation capital projects throughout the city, including bridge rehabilitations, bridge reconstructions, resurfacing, complete street projects, shoreline improvements, and streetscapes. Those are also citywide. The Department of Transportation is requesting new public grant funds in the amount of $1,500,000 from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for the Shoreline Project. Funds will be used for shoreline protection along Lake Michigan from 45th Street to 51st Street, Morgan Shoals. Large storm events in the late 2019 and early 2020 caused further erosion at Morgan Shoals, threatening the stability of South Lakeshore Drive. Those funds will be used for the placement of riprap and concrete blocks for shoreline protection. And these will affect wards 4 and 5. There was one contract associated. The Department of Transportation is requesting new public grant funds in the amount of $197,000 from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for the stormwater mitigation grant. Funds will be used to install 2 green alleys in the 10th ward, and this project is set to start August 20. There's one contract associated, and this will affect the 10th ward. We are also requesting authorization to designate authority for various department heads to execute grant agreements associated with the COVID, FEMA, and coronavirus relief funding, which was previously approved by council. And that concludes all of our ordinance amendments in the amount of $71,030,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. We have several questions, hands up from committee members. We'll start with Alderman Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. Maybe I'm missing something from my staff because I have something that says 51 million and she's saying 71 million. Did we get that and that breakdown? Do we have that? Was that sent to us?
Yes.
What she was saying was going to each ward and all of that? You saying yes, Chairman, all that was sent to us?
Yes, Alderman, there was an amended 925 discussion paper that was sent to you last night. That was the amendment because we had to put in that last grant from the Walder Fellowship COVID-19 program.
Mhm.
And so the 51 million is actually new grant funds out of a total of 71 million. The rest were about 18 million for new COVID-19 funds, and the remainder was of 1.3 million was carryover grant funds. And that was all in the report that you received last night.
Along with her breakdown of where all this was being allocated to, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
There should have been an attachment on the delegate agencies from the Department of Family and Support Services for all of the programs that they're getting money for. There was also the Department of Transportation. There was an attachment for all of the Rebuild Illinois locations and what ward they were going to. That was for the $29 million. And there was another attachment about the emergency and transitional housing agencies that DFSS is funding, which was also in that package.
Okay, I'll go pull it, and if I can't find it, I'll let you know. But thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, in terms of the 17th ward, very quickly on transportation, it looks like under arterial street resurfacing, there is money allocated from the rebuild dollars for your ward.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it.
Alderman Irvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question was along the same. Where was the resurfacing going? I did see the breakout of the Rebuild Illinois locations, but it didn't really get into what streets we were doing. And I think if that could just be provided through the chair at a point in time when those determinations are made, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Also, I would suggest that you follow up directly too with CDOT. We'll get that information through the chair, but if you could have your staff follow up with CDOT, it might even be quicker.
Will do.
All right. Alderman Thompson.
Sorry, Madam Chair. So just on the transportation on these additional funds that we get from U.S. Department of Transportation. So was this already allocated, or is this new money? I know we've had some streets using some additional funds, non-city funds. So can I get a clarification on, is this fresh money for new projects?
Okay, we have Grant Davis from the Department of Transportation.
You're muted.
You're muted.
I have a very sensitive laptop. We have Grant Davis with us from the Department of Transportation. Mr. Davis, if you could walk us through the two grants.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Actually, the two largest grants, one for 29.29 million and the other one for 26 million.
Yes, Madam Chair. And members of the committee, thank you very much for having me this morning. My name is Grant Davis. I am a coordinating planner with the Chicago Department of Transportation's Division of Project Development. So I'd be happy to walk you through the two grants that we're receiving. The first one, the Rebuild.
No, we just redid it again.
This is a new project, program from the state. This is part of the capital bill that was passed last year. These are new funds that are coming into us, and we're going to be using these for a variety of projects. Most of these projects were selected based on need, and we're looking at also making sure that we make sure that these are distributed across the city in an equitable position. A lot of this funding will be used to leverage existing federal funding, so we'll be using it for match. Through this funding that we're getting, we're going to be able to leverage approximately $118.7 million of federal funds. The other program, the Cook County funding, this is new funding as well. We have a IGA with the county for approximately $20 million. And what this amendment will allow us to do is actually accept this funding. These projects, we have not yet determined how they will be, which projects will get this. I should stress that the projects that are approved through this, most of this funding is actually, since it is county funding, the approval of how it's used and decision of how it's used is actually made at the county level, and they dictate to us how we should be spending it.
So, Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Is appropriate now?
Yes, keep going, Alderman.
Okay, so I'm just trying to coordinate. As you know, we coordinate in our individual wards various infrastructure projects, and we do that, at least in the way I do it. We try to be responsive to need, as well as being equitable and fair, and making sure that throughout the entire ward that we're addressing the numerous infrastructure projects. So without knowing where these projects are going, we think we have to have some communication, because maybe that would impact a decision that we would be making on our infrastructure projects ourselves, and where we could perhaps piggyback onto a project, or perhaps we don't need to do other work in that segment of the ward, and I could use that money elsewhere to be more equitable and fair. And so I'm requesting that we get some information, or it doesn't even sound like you have an idea where those projects. I think we have a pretty good handle as the local elected officials as to where the infrastructure, and CDOT being the department that supports us in determining what infrastructure needs to be addressed. So I guess, Grant, I would ask you, how are we coordinating that?
So the county projects, those anything that is coming through your ward, I can make sure that those should be coordinated with you through our menu services group, and I can make sure that that does happen.
Okay. Well, what is the timing of
Alderman Thompson, the county money typically comes through your Cook County Commissioner.
Right.
And so those dollars should be coordinated on those locations. Basically, you should be telling CDOT what you want.
Right. I was addressing both, and then just on the timing of the funding for this.
Grant, on the Rebuild Illinois locations, have these projects had previous discussions with the alderman?
I am not sure, but I can ensure that happens if it has not happened yet. Most of these projects are long-standing projects that have been on the books for quite a while.
Okay, so if we pass this through committee today, my expectation is that you will get to all 50 aldermen the various projects affiliated with these project areas. I know for some of them you don't know yet. They're to be determined, like the bikeways and the boulevard stuff, but your street resurfacing, your traffic signal modernization, and all of the others. If you could get information to the aldermen before we vote on this at our next council meeting.
Okay, most of these should have been typically are included through the capital briefings, but I can ensure that we can get these information out to the aldermen immediately.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, that addresses some of my concerns. What I was asking, if this was new money, but if this was just the funding source for what we previously discussed earlier in the year on the capital, then we've had those discussions, albeit months ago. That's what I was trying to clarify. And it sounds like, at least on some of it, it is the funding source for the capital that we discussed earlier in the year.
That is, most of these projects, yes, they have already been discussed, and this is simply using additional funding to leverage those projects and the funding that are in them.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson, are you finished?
Yes, I can ask questions offline. I don't understand that last comment. If we have the projects already funded and now we have more funding to leverage that project, I don't know what that means. We either have the money from the project earlier in the year or we don't.
I think what I heard him say was that that we don't have the full funding, that this Rebuild Illinois money is to also leverage some federal money that's anticipated to fund these projects. Is that correct, Grant?
Yes, so some of these are new projects, some of these are existing projects, and this funding will allow us to get those projects off the ground.
Okay, I guess just to clarify, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but when we talk about capital projects earlier in the year, we can't let a contract until we have all the money in the account. So the capital projects, for example, that I discussed with CDOT and with water, and when we have our briefings at the beginning of the year, those are all legit projects that have the funding and are moving forward. If it's hypotheticals or planned projects that aren't part of that capital, but it's something that we would like to do, then sure, we can use monies leveraged with the federal funding to then have those fully funded so that we could let the contract. But that's different than the capital projects that we discussed earlier in the year. Correct?
Yes, Chairman Dahl, this is Tom Carney, if I could jump in on this.
Oh, I didn't know you were on the call, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to join a little late.
Please identify yourself. And
Hi, Tom Carney, First Deputy Commissioner, Chicago Department of Transportation. Just to clarify, so the Rebuild Illinois funds, as we had talked about with the council and many others, was the great need for a capital bill for our state. Many years without having it, there was a long laundry list of infrastructure needs that developed in our city, from major bridge repair, viaduct repair, street reconstructions, all the sorts of things that CDOT does. And for many years, we were trying to find our next meal. So, we would have some funding, we'd piece together some funding to start the design of some things, but maybe we didn't have enough funding to take it to final design or to actually get it to construction. Maybe some locations we had TIF funds, other locations we didn't have any. So what you have to keep in mind with the Rebuild Illinois funds that are now flowing because of the capital bill, it was a lot of going back to things that had been worked on in progress, that hadn't been funded for years. So it was kind of like going to stuff that we known infrastructure needs and things that were farther down the pike. If money comes, it's great, but there always needs to be that lead time. So we had a lot of things that was in design that was just at the final stage, and we didn't have the funding to put us over the edge, or we didn't have the funding that we needed to be the local share to trigger the federal funding. I don't know if you recall, like Grant had cited that this was going to trigger additional federal funds. So a lot of this stuff is, think the Rebuild Illinois, capital stuff, bridge work, viaduct work, all those sorts of things that we've been longing to get to over these years. With regards to the county money, the county, the Invest in Cook program is the program that I believe most of the council is familiar with. We're working with their county commissioner. There's an allocation of money for the ward. We always, with our menu team, work to try and have the menu money program first, get that through, and then we engage with the wards to get the county money allocation program, because of things like this, the 925, it's not technically online yet. So that's why we try and have you have your program, your menu first, then we go to the county. This gets approved, then we start programming out the county work. There are some things, some projects that CDOT, there's two parts of the Investing Quick. There are some projects that CDOT programs, but again, those are projects that we know about, that if we can get some local funds, it triggers federal funding. And in our dialogue with the county, they typically like to use that portion to trigger federal funds or things that have a regional impact.
So then, Chair, and I know, Chair, you're on mute, so I don't want to be talking over you, but if it's appropriate, I would just say, so then what Grant was talking about was actually not accurate. So the Rebuild Illinois funds aren't the capital projects in which we spoke to and were briefed on earlier in the year. In fact, some of these might, I don't know, I don't recall any briefings on the Rebuild Illinois fund. So I don't know if these are bridges and road work that was prior to my tenure here as alderman. And I don't know who was communicated, because the person from my office that handles infrastructure is not aware of any, and I just checked with him, wasn't aware of any briefings on any. It might be that, maybe there's no projects in the 11th Ward, but it certainly wasn't the capital briefings that we had earlier in the year. It's a totally different set of projects that the first deputy referenced.
Tom, do you want to respond to that? And then I'd like to move on, Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, so this was definitely post the CIP briefings, Alderman, but we certainly can provide you, and I believe it is the list of projects are in there, but this money, notice about the first allocation of this came after the CIP briefings that we had with the wards in February.
Okay, Tom, if we could just follow up with our
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Smith, followed by Alderman Ramirez Rosa.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question with regard to the funds that are being allocated to the Department of Family and Support Services that are for early childhood. Could you please clarify whether these funds are simply part of the funding that has been announced recently, or are these going to fund any new seats, particularly to those organizations that were defunded as of July, as of the end of June?
Alderman Smith, these are funds very.
Could you identify yourself? We all know you, but for
Yes,
the
I'm
record.
sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. This is Lisa Morrison Butler. I'm Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. I apologize for not introducing myself. Alderman Smith, no, these funds are not going for slot reimbursements. These funds are very specific, and they are one-time activities where a slot reimbursement would be an ongoing reimbursement. And these funds are very specifically focused on helping the agencies prepare for the safe return of families and children into those buildings. And so that's why you see things, all four of the early learning grants that you see before you, it's all focused on the same kind of thing. So it is these educational kits, it's technology for e-learning. One of the things that we learned in the early learning community, no surprise, was that during COVID, when our families were trying to be connected to the facilities that served them and to the teachers that wanted to support them, that a lot of those families and even some of those facilities did not have the right technology. So these are all very specific gifts that are designed to make sure that the buildings are safe, that families can return. But no, ma'am, these are not dollars that would support reimbursement for slots long-term.
Thank you. I saw in the materials that we got that they indicated each one of these things said, this is for 30 providers, see attached. I didn't see an attached list of providers. Could that be please provided? Maybe I just didn't get it.
Yes, ma'am. I thought that we listed all of the delegates, but I do understand that maybe the list of delegates and the way the grant is written. So for instance, there are certain delegates that might be a Head Start delegate, but not an early Head Start delegate. And so I will double check to see the list that was shared with you, and then we will make sure that you can track the list with the type of grant.
Yeah, thank you. I just didn't see the list attached. All right. No further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Smith. We did send the attachment, but I'm going to have the commissioner just send you the attachment herself, so we don't have to do it again.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Alderman Ramirez Rosa, before you go, I wanted to have Alderman Osterman. I overlooked him, and you'll be right after him. Alderman Osterman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One quick question to CDOT related to the money for the lakefront. The 1.5 million that's in the appropriation that looks to come from the Water Reclamation District. My question to Mr. Carney, or the other representative from CDOT, is if they could provide what money is going to lakefront restoration in this. And I think, Madam Chairman, at a previous pre-COVID budget meeting, we talked to the Park District to get an estimate. So if there's a way that we could get that from the Park District on the lakefront, I would appreciate it. But to the question, besides the 1.5, is there any other money coming for lakefront restoration?
Commissioner Carney, or
Yes.
can you respond
Yes,
to that?
Carney, CDOT. Alderman Osterman, the work on trying to cobble together funding for lakefront restoration, that continues. So we're exploring all options. There's some funding with Water Reclamation District that's in the Water Reclamation District. There's some here for the state. I think maybe if I can follow up with you afterwards, we'll cobble together the whole list, because it's an ongoing process of looking under every stone and trying to piece together, because as you well know, the need is, the cost is very great. So,
separate from today, what I'll do, I'd like to set up a briefing with some of the lakefront aldermen that have the concerns, whether through the budget committee or through just coming together. But I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, Alderman Osterman. I just want to announce that the Committee on Workforce will be delayed until 11:30 this morning. We'll continue with Alderman Ramirez Rosa, followed by Alderman Villegas.
Thank you, Chairman Dowell. On the written communication that we received from the Budget Committee yesterday, there is the memo that lays out the summaries of the budget amendments. And for the Rebuild Illinois, in that paragraph at the end, it says project list attached, but in the email and in the document, there is no project list attached. So I wonder if perhaps that could be sent out. I think that would help answer some of the questions that myself and my colleagues have.
Yeah, it was in the original attachment, Alderman, that went out, and we just sent out the amended summary form last night when another grant was added. So in the first packet we sent you.
So look for the first email. Okay, thank you. I will do that. Then
we will resend it. We will resend it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Then my question for CDOT is, I appreciate hearing that some of this money will be going towards green alleys, particularly in wards like the 10th ward, which are very geographically large. and which their menu money is just not enough to reach all of their needs. I'm wondering if the department has looked at a more robust green alley program. Obviously, a lot of our alleys have very poorly maintained infrastructure or not a lot of infrastructure. In some instances, they just threw asphalt over grass. Obviously, over the many years of more asphalt thrown on top of asphalt, we've ended up with a lot of alleys that have a lot of different flooding issues. And this will oftentimes require a concrete alley or green alley solution, which can cost anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000. And obviously, when you're an alderman and you have a block that is flooding, and you're hit with the question for, you're hit with a request to resurface that alley, and it comes back that you have to do a green alley. That puts serious constraints on the limited menu dollars that we have. So I'm wondering, has CDOT looked at this, and has there been any thought about using either state funds or federal funds towards a more robust green alley program that can assist in building out green alleys all across the city of Chicago where they're needed?
Yes, Alderman Tom Carney with CDOT. It is something we're always trying to find solutions and options with these alleys, because alley flooding is a common concern across the city. From a strategy perspective, the capital bill passed last year. It takes some time for the funds to start flowing. There was a backlog of major capital stuff that our city had to address, and that we're addressing. And we do see, there is the very real situation of the COVID that has now dampened the impact of the capital bill, because for so many months there's been less driving, so there's been less motor fuel tax revenues. So we're still trying to work with the budget office to understand what that's all going to mean. But I bring it up to say that as the department, long term, yes, we do want to start. We think that the capital bill is still going to provide our city with resources that we can expand into things and address some of these infrastructure concerns in the neighborhoods and go into building more alleys of that kind. But it just is, I think right now we're still at a time where the funds haven't fully started flowing, and we still have a lot of catch up to do from a lack of a capital bill for so long.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alderman Villegas, followed by Alderman Wagaspat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification here, so the 51 million that we're appropriating today, or potentially appropriating today, is to leverage some federal dollars. Is that correct?
Tom Carney, see that? Yes, the different projects will have different funding components, but yes, it will leverage a significant amount of federal funds. Yes.
Okay. And how do the projects that you've identified, how do they come? Are they on some type of capital plan that you have?
So the Rebuild Illinois, definitely we were identifying projects that had been on the to-do list for several years. A lot of like viaduct reconstruction, bridge work. So we had known projects to do. The part of the other part of it, which is the investing cook, are projects that are still, some regards, to be determined in working with the wards and working with what the county approves.
Right. So on the county side, my understanding is that the Cook County Commissioners, this is part of their quote unquote menu program. And they've identified projects that they would like either in conjunction with the aldermen or they've deemed priorities. And so those have already been earmarked. The Rebuild Illinois funds, those projects have not been earmarked, saying that, you know, you're going to rebuild North Avenue or something like that.
I would say that, again, like this first wave of it is like, we're still trying to take care of items that are like, you know, years of need. But
let me just say that. So when we come to like bridges, when you come to viaducts, I mean, those are very expensive projects. And so we could be wasting a lot of those funds, although they're necessary, but we're spending a ton of money on these big projects, which in turn would dilute the amount of funds that come to each ward. And that's my concern, because here, I have no bridges in my ward. I'm talking more on the resurfacing side. And I think that that's something that with the motor fuel tax, with the city sticker program, that in my opinion, there just hasn't been a good enough plan for rebuilding our roads. So that's where, you know, with this Rebuild Illinois, I think the city's looking at these larger, more expensive projects because there's more money there. But, you know, for those that don't have bridges and viaducts that are in need of repair, I think we're gonna hurt from this. So as it relates to capital, I'm just
Alderman Villegas?
Yes.
Let me just say, did you look at the list of locations under the Rebuild Illinois program? Because there's about 6 million that's been set aside for street resurfacing.
Right, but if you 6 million, you got to figure it's 50,000 a block, 45,000 a block. So in my ward alone, I have north of 400 streets. So and every ward has, so 6 million is nothing. To be blunt.
The 6 million, you gotta remember the arterial resurfacing program is 20% state funded, 80% federal funds. So this triggers the additional money that we get, so that we have about a $40 million arterial resurfacing. So this is the 6 million, the local funds that trigger that federal money for 40 million citywide. So
okay.
there's a lot of this stuff on here, Alderman, is getting the local funds that trigger the federal funds that help pay for the larger, 40 miles of arterial resurfacing. You are correct. Bridge, viaduct, reconstruction, very expensive, but this is the local funds that trigger, which is typically 80% of federal funds.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to get that point across. Thanks, Alderman Villegas. Continue. Alderman Villegas?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, I look to have further discussions in the Economic Capital and Technology Committee, because I think that there's a lot of needs and we got to figure a plan here. And I hate just giving blanket appropriations without having it line items, so that way every alderman can advocate for their area, understanding that there are some needs that we got to take a look at. But I want to make sure that there's funding coming to these street resurfacing and alleys that have just been in disrepair for quite some time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Villegas. Alderman Wagner's back.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Question for Commissioner Morrison Butler on the emergency and transitional housing. On page 8, I think you have it. I was just looking at the breakdown there, and is the bulk of the funding for that going to the interim housing for COVID-related creation of these shelters, or was it split up between some of the other locations, like for instance, Night Ministry? I see, we use that as it'll be the emergency shelter plus the agency offices. So I was wondering if you could clarify that a little bit.
Yes, Lisa Morrison Butler, DFSS. Alderman, IDHS allows us to give small grants up to $3,000 for essentially renovations and equipment purchases. And so this 41,000 is really going to allow 10 of our shelter partners to apply for these grants for supplies and some of the renovation equipment that they need as they try to make their shelters safer. So that's what this particular thing is for.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wagensback. Alderman Napolitano.
My apologies, Chairwoman. The question was just asked and answered. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, seeing that we have no other questions, can I get a motion to approve item number 1 on the agenda by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine quorum?
Move to pass, Chairwoman.
So moved, Alderman O'Shea.
Moved by Alderman Shea, hearing no objections, so ordered. The due pass recommendation of this ordinance will be reported out at our next city council meeting on July 22nd. Before we go, we want to go back and hear from the law department regarding item number 2. And I think we have Jeff Levine with us. Jeff?
Good morning, Jeff Levine, Law Department.
Jeff, there were by Alderman here regarding whether or not the law department has reviewed this initiative put forward by the department AIS and the legality of taking this kind of gift from the University of Chicago, and whether or not it had been, this transaction had been approved by the Board of Ethics. And then I will go back to the questions of the people who have their hands up on this item. If you could just speak to those things.
Sure. Yes, I have reviewed and I participated in drafting this code amendment. It while the essence of what's being provided is in the nature of a gift, given that this requires entry of a contract, it really makes it more, that takes it out of the realm of a pure gift. And so that's the reason for this code amendment, which is providing authorization for a contract, because currently under the code, the city does have authorization to accept pure gifts.
All right. So I'll go back to the questions. I see Alderman Moore from the committee has his hand up, and then Alderman Lopez.
Chairman, for the sake of time, are we still trying to vote on this, or are you still holding it?
I'm trying to vote on it if those questions are answered today.
Okay, so for me, because whoever was talking previously was talking about some Ogilvy project or whatever. I wasn't either familiar with that or wasn't here when that was happening. So what I'm trying to understand is, what are we texting and who are we texting in its simplest form?
Okay, Jason, are you still on the line, Kunesh?
I am, yes, Jason Kunesh from AIS. I'm on the line, and yes, I'm not familiar with the content of the messaging. My understanding is that the communications desire came up in the context of COVID-19. So being able to message people information about city status related to that.
Okay.
Mr. Kunesh, this capability allows the city to communicate with individual citizens.
Can I say, even though it may be prompted by COVID-19, the code purpose here is for, in effect, an enhancement of mass city messaging, namely being able to get a third party to help manage city outreach via electronic means as opposed to just posting on the city site or through paper mailings.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Before we go to Alderman Moore, do you have another question? Because I wanted Steve Berlin.
I was done, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
Point
Steve
of
Berlin?
information.
Point of information, Alderman Tunney.
So Jeff, just so we can understand this a little bit better, the city does reverse 911 calls and maybe reverse 911 texts. Is that maybe an application that passage of this would be as an example for us as Alder people?
I don't think so, because the language here speaks to mass, quote, mass transmission of messages. And what you're referring to sounds like a more individualized thing, which I have to believe there's currently the ability to do reverse 911 calls. I think this is more geared towards non-emergency information that would go out to the public at large, for instance, speaking about water bills or other kind of widely applicable important city information.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Before we go to the next Alderman, Steve Berlin, I understand that you're online. Would you make a point about the ordinance under consideration?
Sure. Lucia just called and asked me about the governmental ethics ordinance. And under the governmental ethics ordinance, this would be perfectly appropriate as a gift to the city. It would just need to be disclosed by the accepting department to the Board of Ethics and to Reshma Soni in the Comptroller's office. But what I also told Lucia, and luckily Jeff Levine is on the Zoom meeting as well, is that my understanding, and Jeff, correct me if I'm misstating it, is that if it's more like a contract, in other words, if UIC is expecting the city to perform any, for example, an indemnity, or it's a conditional gift, so to speak, then it's more like a contract, and then it would have to go through the law department. But if it's just a gift and essentially there are no strings or conditions attached, the ethics ordinance is not in any way a barrier. It just needs to be disclosed by the accepting department, OEMC, I'm guessing, to the Board of Ethics and to the Comptroller, and then we make as a gift to the city, accept it as a gift to the city, and we just make those disclosures public on our website.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, would you respond to Steve? And then I want to go to Alderman Riley, followed by Alderman Thompson.
Sure. First of all, Mr. Berlin is entirely correct as far as his characterization of how city gifts or gifts to the city are accepted. In this instance, I think the code amendment before the committee contemplates a contractual relationship where we would be engaging a third party to help manage the technical aspects of this kind of electronic outreach. And that would fall more traditionally within the role of a contract. And so that's why we have this code amendment, which would authorize that.
Thank you. Alderman Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question's for Jeff. It's not related at all to the ethics of what's being proposed here. It's more about that contract that we're referencing. I understand that the first $100,000 or so of value in these text messages that can be sent out would be a donation or gift from the university. But I guess the question is, we're being asked to authorize you to execute a contract without knowing, are there financial strings attached or financial implications for the city of Chicago? Will, as a result of these negotiations, we be on the hook to spend X millions of dollars a year through this platform? Will we have to pay them a management or service fee on a regular basis? We're just trying to get a sense of, yes, the gift sounds wonderful and we're appreciative, but what else comes with that gift that might expose the city to some further financial obligations?
Well, That's correct. I think obviously anytime you have the city entering into a contract, there are costs and other obligations associated with it running both ways. I will note that the code currently provides AIS with contracting authority to make city applications available for download. And so what's being considered today is not an entirely new form of contracting authority, but really an expansion of what's already there into a new aspect, which is again the ability to more effectively get out city messaging widely.
No, I understand, and I don't know that you had the benefit of being on the in the meeting earlier when we were talking about this with the department. And this will be my last piece, Chairman Dow. All of us, or many of us, in our political roles, use these platforms. This is a competitive space. I think prior testimony even referred to this as a commodity at this point. There are many platforms that do mass texting and mass messaging. And so I'm just trying to understand here, because this is coming through as in the nature of a gift, what's to prevent any other vendor from saying, hey, we want to give you a gift of $100,000 worth of free text messages if you sign this contract. Mm-hmm. That's my concern, is that this is a competitive marketplace, yet we're venturing down this path with one particular vendor. I guess that's my only concern here.
Right. Well, I guess as I understand it, the gift element here is, I would more comfortably characterize it as a particular vendor seeking to offer terms that the city will find favorable. And I think that, as is the case with any department that enters into a contract with an outside party, they are under an obligation to make sure that the city is getting the best deal for its money, that the public funds are being expended wisely. So I think you're right. There is nothing preventing another vendor from saying, hey, let us provide you these services, and here's what we're willing to throw in to make it a better deal for the city. That still leaves AIS responsible for evaluating whether it's a good agreement for the city.
I understand, and I appreciate you taking time to answer my questions. I would just say to my colleagues that if there are lots of vendors out there, I would just hope that the department would apply some due diligence and make sure that there aren't other vendors willing to meet that dollar amount and then some. I love the idea of competitive bidding. It always ends up with the best result for the taxpayer. But anyway, I just throw that out there for my colleagues to consider. Thank you for answering my questions, Jeff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're mute.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Alderman Riley. Alderman Thompson, followed by Alderman Irvin, and then Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to follow up on a couple of things. So, Jeff, when this was presented by the department, it was under the context of the commissioner needing the flexibility in an emergency situation to get information out, which you contradicted by saying that it's not. This is more of an agreement just to get information out, whether it be, I think you used the example of a water bill. And so since it's not under the context of an emergency, I don't see why we can't follow the normal pattern of every other contract and have it go through procurement like we do on everything else. I do have a question because I think we're talking past one another here, and I'd like Steve Berlin to weigh in as well on the gift. It's one thing, I think, Steve, the way you have portrayed it, if somebody wants to give a gift to the city. It's another thing that if a vendor, for example, gives the first 10,000 garbage cans to us free to then sign a contract to buy 250,000 garbage cans? And what's the difference between that and $100,000 worth of text messaging so that we then procure and sign a contract with them for future? And so, that would be the second question. And then obviously the EDS question. So Jeff, my first question is, why can't we follow the normal course? If it isn't, according to you, it's not done on an emergency situation. And there's nothing, let me just add, that says we can't enter into procurement with a company that in the event there's an emergency, then that triggers the contract, and whatever that emergency might be, we've already negotiated for that year, and it behooves us to do that.
Well, the primary impetus for this code amendment may well have been born out of the emergency context. I will say that as written, it is more generalized and not just limited to emergency situations. As far as the second part of your question regarding could this be a service that we obtain through the normal procurement process, the answer is there is nothing preventing that. It may well be that the Department Assets and Information Services has a need for a more rapid procurement, or that the nature of this, because of its technical quality, fits better within their sphere. But that's as far as I can really go on that. They would need to provide more detail regarding their need for direct contracting authority here.
And let me just, from Steve, before you respond to the gift question, let me just say, we had already given earlier on with the emergency situation with COVID, we've already given authority to the mayor and to procurement and the departments to enter into emergency situations as it pertains to COVID. And so to address, I think it was Jason's comment earlier about this and the flexibility, that already exists. So I think it's not accurate to say we missed out on something because we didn't have the ability to quickly enter into a contract. And what's the difference between AIS and Streets and Sand, or AIS and the CPD, or any other department? Each of those departments also have the appropriate expertise. But again, we have a procurement because these are the tax dollars, and it should all be done on an open and transparent manner where everyone can see it's a fair process and it's done for the public betterment. So, I want to also get to this question on the gift and have Steve, in the context of how it was presented, that it's the first $100,000 of texting are free, and then we enter into the contract, not just a free gift.
Steve Berlin?
Well, I think I would still go back to what I said before, which is the way we would think of a gift is it's just simply a one-off. We're just giving you something, and there's no option to buy more, or there's no option to cancel. Once you get into something beyond, we're giving you. Once you say we're giving you the first $100,000, it implies a contract, because it implies that there's going to be more, which means that the city then could make a choice. Either we stop it or we buy $100,000 more, or 100,000 items more. So once you pose the question that way, you're already outside of the realm of a gift, and you're within the realm of a contract. The way that we would think of a gift is we're just giving you 100,000 units, or we're giving you 100,000 free texts, or whatever it is. End of story. That's a gift. But if we're giving you 100,000, and after you use up that 100,000, you can either cancel or we can enter into an agreement, then I don't think that first 100,000 is really a gift. I think it's just a term of the contract. So that's
Okay, so then in that case, Steve, the University of Chicago coming and saying to us, we want to give you $100,000 of value of texting during this pandemic. There was nothing then that precluded AIS from entering into that and accepting that. With absent this code modification does nothing on the gift. The code modification is modifying who enters into a contract and who has the authority and oversight, and it's abdicating the authority of the budget committee to the commissioner. So correct. So even if we don't modify this, wouldn't they have been able, the city been able to accept that gift?
If it was well, again though, if I understand it, if the gift was we're just giving you 100,000 free texts.
Yes.
And that's it. There would be nothing in the ethics ordinance that would prohibit the city from accepting that.
Well, okay, I just want to go back. AIS did not say that in the previous testimony. They said,
Jason, excuse me, Alderman, Jason, I can't, Kanish from AIS, could you please clarify this point?
Yes, so the capability is provided by Upland, and that is the organization which is seeking, to enter into a contract with the city. The excuse me, the University of Chicago is the entity paying for the texts. So two separate entities, and they do not want to be part of that contract. They would just like to give the gift.
So the contract you would be entering into would be a maximum of 100,000, right? It's not open-ended.
That is correct.
okay, so this gets a little confusing. So the Upland is the vendor who's providing the service. The payment for that service is coming from the University of Chicago. So it's similar to, let's say, hypothetically, or actually, we get a donation from a philanthropic resident who rebuilds the lakefront. He gives the money, but we go through procurement to make sure that EDSs are filed, that it's full and open disclosure, that it's competitively bid. All of those agreements and public documents are exactly that, made public. So why is this different?
Made your point. Let's move on. I got your point.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions? Alderman Thompson?
No, ma'am. Thank you. I'm sorry, Chair. I and I'm not trying to be a pain here, but it's just words matter, and what one's saying and what we're saying are sort of quickly moving along here. So I appreciate the time.
Oh my goodness. Someone just handed me a note. Chief Waller just retired.
Wow.
Alderman Irvin. Alderman Irvin?
Yes. Similarly, sorry about that. You all have been friends during Geneva's time, so she's jumping in. If this is something that we decide to do, would everybody in the city have access to this information and access to this capacity? For example, if we wanted to send out information, ward-based information to our constituents, will we also have access to do that as well?
As written, I think, I mean, it speaks to, quote, I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, please, Jeff.
Okay. I think as written, it speaks to city programs, services, and announcements. I think the spirit of this would be more of a citywide focus as opposed to ward specific.
So I guess, is the city council not part of the city? I mean, if it's for the city, aren't we part of the apparatus of the city? So
Yes,
I mean, it seems like something should be open to all of us, not just a specific department or a specific group, if we're talking about city communications.
Yes, let me say that the language does not limit or prevent what you are speaking to. I'm simply saying that I think as contemplated, the more frequent use would be situations that are not ward specific, but technically that is not a limitation in the amendment before you.
Okay, and based upon what's been stated, if this is a gift, there's nothing that would require us to do anything. So then what we're saying is that this really is not a gift, that this is the beginning of potentially the beginning of a long-term relationship and not a one-off situation. Because if it was a one-off situation, it could be accepted and then we just move on. Is that a fair statement, or am I incorrect?
I'd say you're about 60% correct. That what I'm hearing discussed is a one-off relationship that includes a gift component to it. The ordinance contemplates similar future instances of enabling us to have a third party help us getting these messages out, regardless of whether that service is being paid for by the city or by a philanthropist.
If the third, okay, I don't want to beat this up, but at this point, after the gift component is over with, then the balance of the conversation would need to go through a procurement process.
The ordinance would permit AIS to do that procurement.
Subject to what?
I'm sorry, what do you mean subject to what?
So are we given blanket authority for AIS to enter into an agreement? I mean, this is kind of like, I won't call it a Trojan horse, but it's kind of like, trying to drive a Mack truck through a pinhole. I'm just asking that, from that perspective.
Well, I think it does give AIS the ability to do this. There are code provisions that say that when a department head is exercising contract authority, they have to adhere to certain general requirements. For example, seeking minority participation where possible. I think, and of course, their ability to do contracting here would be limited to the subject matter stated. As you know, procurement, when they engage in their procuring activity, they don't they have authority to do so independently, and so this would really be a situation specific variant of that for AIS for this purpose.
Okay, so in theory, the ability for the city to do this exists. So why is this then necessary?
Well, one element that is, I believe procurement does not have power to indemnify, and that's currently a provision within AIS's current code power, and that would be included here as well. So I think in order for procurement to do this, they would also probably need to obtain specific authority from City Council.
And I would like to point out the reason why this rests within AIS as a new department. This is Jason Kunish from AIS, is because we are to be the service provider for all other city departments. That is why this authority would rest with the commissioner of AIS, so that any services acquired through such means would then be available, as the ordinance says, for communication of program services and information to Chicago residents.
Thank you, Alderman Urban. You got some more?
No, I was gonna stop at that point, allow my colleagues to chime in on that. Thank
All
you,
right.
thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I have a question for Jason Kunish. Is this an emergency situation here?
I don't believe that this situation in
Time-sensitive?
particular is a time-sensitive issue. I believe that it arose from conversations about COVID, but I do think it's the more general case of when we are offered a gift like this, that there needs to be a signatory when it's a capability. We need to be able to have somebody sign off on the legal aspects of the relationship with the technology capability provider is really what's the issue here.
All right. Alderman Wagisback, you put your hand down. You don't have a question now? Oh, no. Jeff, before we go on, I have a question. Why could this not be a 925 grant agreement?
Because that would only, that would cover the cities receiving the grant money, but 925 typically does not also authorize entering into a contract for the use of that money. That's typically authorized elsewhere. I'm sorry.
Alderman Wagisback.
Chairwoman, a question for Jeff Levine. Jeff, could we put a sunset on this so that when the 100,000 runs out, or pick a date, end of the year, that they would have to come back for approval again? I mean, does that help or satisfy anything, just to put a cap on it? If we want to move forward.
I can't speak to whether that would help. I think what AIS is looking for here is the ability to achieve this new functionality on a forward-going basis. So I think what you're describing would be a fairly significant limiter to make it just covering this one transaction. I think if I can speculate, I think AIS would say that's better than nothing, but that it would be better for them from a programmatic standpoint to be able to get out, for city departments to be able to get out information onward into the future. Bear in mind, I think this isn't talking about a new function that AIS would be doing. It's really talking about enabling AIS to do messaging in a new, more modern way.
That would be nice. Yes.
Yes, if I may
Is
jump
that
in.
it, Alderman Wagisback?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
All right, Alderman Villegas, followed by Alderman Moore. Alderman Lopez and Vasquez, sorry for the long wait trying to get to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This related to AIS. So is this something that that AIS thought of and put like an RFI out on the street? Or is this something that a technology firm said, hey, this is something that we feel might be good for the city, and perhaps you guys could utilize this type of technology?
My understanding is that the relationship came from the University of Chicago and their conversations with members of the mayor's office about the efficacy of the communications program that University of Chicago runs to communicate with their community.
So then it was a technology idea that someone came up with and said, hey, this might be something good for the city. I'm just, so if AIS thought this was a good idea, why wouldn't they put out an RFI to say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish? Hey, tech firms.
Sure. Well, yes, sir. There are many capabilities which we could fund. Traditionally, we have been fairly underfunded as a department. So I think we certainly could pay for things like this. We have to date not really been able to afford these types of things, quite frankly. And so I would say that is part of the reason why. So when you see something like this come along opportunistically, you say, wow, this is something that could help us get the message out, whatever set of messages that they may be. They will definitely help us to reach residents. And we do this on a basis of free things too. So nextdoor.com, for example, is a site that we use to get out city messaging as often as we can, because that's a free service. We try to get messaging out through as many channels as possible to make sure we're reaching residents in as many different contexts as we can to the best of our ability.
No, I understand that, but again, that's just one solution. I just think that if the city determined, hey, we have an issue, and then put it out there, I think you would get all types of different types of solutions that could be free as well. And then again, I agree that AIS is underfunded, and I think that we need to take a look.
Alderman Villegas, can I say that in analogous situations in the code, I do view it as the department's responsibility to engage in the kind of competitive outreach that you were speaking about in order to for the financial benefit of the city, and also to legally protect the city for being able to justify spending city funds in the most effective or most cost-effective manner.
Yeah. Well, before I got cut off again, AIS, I agree that their budget, we don't spend enough with them, and we look at IT not as a utility the way that we should. I mean, the days of everyone having, those that were limited to having a phone and pager. I mean, now technology is a utility. So I look forward to trying to work with AIS to see how we can help increase that budget. Because there's a lot of technology out there that could allow for the city to act more efficiently and also create revenue for the city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman.
Chair, can I have a
Villegas.
point of clarification? I just want to make sure.
Alderman Thompson.
So the $100,000 gift that the University of Chicago that was going to give or pay through that upland contract, that opportunity, we missed it because we couldn't procure it. So that no longer exists, correct?
I believe were we to have a positive vote here on this amendment, then we could proceed with that relationship. So that is still possible, yes.
Oh, okay. So we did not miss that, whether it goes through this process or goes through procurement in Andrew's office. The contract, it's not that we didn't miss that opportunity. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I sense some unreadiness here and some more socialization socialization needed on this ordinance. So I'm going to hold this for today to allow some more discussion outside of the committee meeting. But I would like to get through other questions raised by the aldermen. So we have Alderman Moore, Alderman Lopez, and Alderman Vasquez in that order. And then I'd like to bring this conversation.
Since we're going to hold it for the sake of time, just for clarity, are we paying Upland Software anything?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, but we're contracting with Upland Software. We're getting a contract with Upland Software, but we're not paying them anything at this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. That helps me because I just want to be careful because when we got into, I think, something else with our MBWB type of software, when people begin to create things and then that entity comes in and they say, well, we got all this established already, we might as well just go ahead and buy from them. And these internal departments continue to buy from them because they already have the system set up to work with us. And then we don't go out there for a competitive bid, as other aldermen alluding to. And I just want to point out, if people know or not, as I'm looking up, so Upland has a relationship, program management contract with the University of Chicago already. And so and then I'm not saying University of Chicago is doing anything slick, but nothing tells me that if University of Chicago giving us 103 minutes, we're allowing Upland to come in, that they getting something on the back end. And then the Eclipse software piece that's ran through Upland, then there's a benefit to them. And so all of that I'm looking at, and there probably is no minority participation in that if we get to a point where we are spending any money. So thank you, Alderman. I just want to make, Chairman, I just want to make those points. Nobody have to answer anything because we can move forward as we can address anything further after, since she's decided to hold it. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Alderman Lopez, finally.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. I even found the nice groovy text messaging background. I did want to just comment a couple things. I don't want to rehash everything that was said, but I want to say that I do support the spirit of this ordinance. What I do find distressing is the fact that we have this, it's not a gift, it's a promotional item. We'll call it for what it is, waiting in the wings. And for any of my colleagues who aren't certain about this, you can look up Upland Mobility on the website and see that generally speaking, they have a monthly contract that they try to get most smaller customers into, which runs about $2,000 for 100,000 text messages a month. Now, to put things in perspective, $100,000 gift or promotion from University of Chicago would only get us about 670,000 text messages in one shot. So whatever mass event we're talking about, we would not be able to blanket the entire city of Chicago. We would have to spend approximately $40,000 a month based on their pricing with this programming app in order to effectively cover the entire city of Chicago based on what they have posted online. And I believe that I would strongly urge my colleagues to, one, approve this ordinance because it will help the department, but I think the department needs to abandon this promotional item that it's pursuing and actually put out a legitimate bid, because this will wind up being a $500,000 contract by the time we're done in an effort to try and communicate with our residents. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Vasquez.
Almost forgot what this committee meeting is about. No, kidding. So I guess the questions I had was, I work for a telecommunications company. Specifics about the technology. How would they get the database of people to text message? Is that something that the city is providing? Is that based on geocode? How's that information ascertained? I've got concerns about data.
Jason Kanish.
Yes, Alderman, we would use the data which we currently have available for, contacting residents. And so we have a variety of channels which we contact people through, and a variety of either email lists or, text messaging programs that people have opted into. So it wouldn't be anything that would be illegal. It would be whatever current assets the city had in terms of data along those lines.
So if people opted into that program, are they agreeing to have that information shared with another party? And does that other party keep that information?
Well, typically, no. Those would be the types of things that the commissioner would be able to review and have law work with him to review prior to signing that type of an agreement. But these are exactly the types of issues that would need to be reviewed, on a case-by-case basis.
So for this case, we don't know that?
I'm sorry. Well, for this case in particular, no, my understanding is that that data would not be shared. But I think that we are still at the point of beginning this review process.
Okay. So I think the reason why I'm asking is those are things that I believe, being an elected member, that I'd want to know these things to figure out should we move forward or not. And that's why I have even more reservation about a commissioner to be making those decisions when ultimately we'll be held accountable for any results that occur, right? So I'd want to know that on a case-by-case basis. And I think, following the old adage, like there's no such thing as a free lunch, thinking of this as a gift as opposed to the beginning of a relationship has a lot of implications going forward, right? If someone's used a product for whatever amount of time, they'll continue to use that product, and that is the incentive for providing the quote-unquote gift. And so in that kind of nature, it does appear to me to be more contractual, and I think that has implications on procurement, on MBE, WBE, on all those things. And so why it would be a great world where we can take somebody's good faith effort on their judgment, I do believe this is something the council has to make a decision as opposed to giving it to another person to make that call. So that's all I've got. I know we've been here for a while, so I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Alderman Vasquez. The Budget Committee will follow up with AI. And there being no further business before the committee, can I get a motion to adjourn by the same roll call?
Riley moves, so moved.
So moved by Alderman Riley. By the same roll call vote as was applied to determine quorum. So moved by Alderman Riley, hearing no objection. No objection, right? So ordered. The Committee on Budget and Government Operations is adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon and an even more terrific weekend. Thank you.